Hello, I'm sorry to say that I'm back with part 8 of what should have been a 7-part series. If you read the comments and the description in my part 7, while I was actually uploading the video I noticed that there was a problem. It's not that what I did in part 7 doesn't work, it's that it is overly complex. And I fell victim to the very thing that I warn other people about, and that is that I found a potential solution and implementing that solution became the problem for me rather than solving the original problem. If you've seen part 7, and then if you watch this part, you'll understand why. So very briefly, I had a number of issues. They have not changed. And I also made a number of assumptions which have not changed. But the solution I'm going to show today is much simpler than the solution I had in part 7. So I won't waste too much of your time. We'll get straight into this. It will not be a very long video. For this video, I'm actually beginning at the end of part 6. So I'm just forgetting everything I did in part 7 rather than take part 7 and then unwind all of that unnecessary code. Part 6 introduced very little code. I really just allowed you to change the volume type from a risk-based volume to a fixed volume size. And I also allowed the change from requiring 1-minute periods to using the chart period. I'll just very quickly show you the changes in part 6 that came after part 5. I have part 6 open here. I have the MQ5 and the MQ4. Both of those are loading breakout set and forget 6.mqh. And here is the MQH file for part 6, which is where all the work happens. In part 6, firstly, I introduced this enum to allow you to select between fixed lots or a percentage of equity. I added an input then that used that enum type. And then way down here in the open trade function, I introduced this code where I firstly just declared a volume. And then if the risk type is an equity percent, I called the get risk volume function, which is exactly the same as was in part 5. But if the risk type was not equity percent, then it would have been risk fixed lots and then just volume equals input risk. So those are the main changes for the risk. And the other change that I introduced in part 6 was previously these periods were period underscore M1 because I would look at the 1-minute chart to get the actual start and end times of ranges. But because sometimes that data may not be available, I made this change and changed that period underscore M1 to the chart period. And this now relies on you having a chart period that aligns with the start and the end times. And I also changed this end bar rather than end time plus 60 seconds, I just changed that to end time and then add 1 to the bar number that comes back. So that gets us to the end of part 6. And now let's implement the changes to move to break even in a much more simple manner than I had in part 7. Now to begin making the changes, I've saved each of these breakout set and forget 6 files as breakout set and forget 8, just to make sure that I maintain some continuity. In the MQ5 file, I need to change that to set and forget 8. Do the same in the MQ4 file. And then all the work actually happens in the breakout set and forget 8.mqh. I'll change the version number there. None of this is critical so far. And there's also this line, see position info, position info. That line I've discovered is actually not needed, so I'm just going to remove that. I want you to be able to select whether we're moving to break even or not. So I'm introducing another input here. It's just a Boolean, INP use break even, and the default for that's going to be false. If you did watch part 7, you'll know that I set up multiple magic numbers so that I could track the first trade, which I'm referring to as the primary trade, and the other 2 trades independently. In that way, I'll know if the first trade is the one that is closed. I still need multiple magic numbers, but where in part 7 I had 3 magic numbers, now I only need 2. I really just need to differentiate the primary trade from the 2 secondary trades. So I declare this long magic 1 and magic 2. Also, I introduced a position count variable, which I'm using to know when something has changed that means I might need to update because possibly that primary trade is closed. And that's just an integer, position count equals 0 here, and I'll also initialize it in the onInit function. Now since we've gone back to part 6, I can't really just set one magic number because I've got 2 magics, so I'm going to comment out this block of code here, and I'm going to add magic 1 equals the input magic number, And so that will be the magic number for the primary trade, the first trade of the 3. And magic 2 is just magic 1 plus 1. So it's a different magic number. And now, just as I had in part 7, I initialize the position count to 0. And this is going to be used because simply if I look at the number of positions that are open and that changes, then I know I've either opened a position or closed one. And so that will trigger me to go out and search and update in case anything needs to move to break even. And then I'm just calling the update break even function here once, in case the terminal being closed down while a trade closed, and I might not have detected that because the terminal was shut down. So when I first start this expert, I'm going to look for any existing trades that might need to move to break even. So I call it once here in onInit, and I'm also going to call it in the onTick function. So in onTick, the very first thing I do, if positions total is not equal to position count, update break even. And that's my simple way of detecting that a new trade or a new position has opened or a position has closed. I've done this rather than use the functions for onTrade in Metatrader 5 because that onTrade function actually fires multiple times every time a new position is opened or closed. And so I find that this actually reduces that load, and it's also compatible with Metatrader 4. If I go now to the open trade function here, remember I have 2 of these. I have an open trade that calls a second open trade multiple times so I can open each of the trades. Now I didn't mention earlier, but I do allow you to set the take profit value to 0, and in that case I don't take the trade. But if you're going to use to move to break even, then I'm going to assume that take profit 1 is not set to 0, so you always open that first trade. If you want to do something different, you'll have to add the validation for that, but I'm going to assume that that is always not 0, and therefore we're opening the trade. But now, because I'm going to be using different magic numbers, I'm actually going to pass the magic number as an argument from here. And that means that I need to add that as an extra argument in this second open trade function. And that further down in the code where I use the INP magic, I have to just change that to the magic that was passed in. That's for Metatrader 4. But for Metatrader 5, remember I commented out the trade.set expert magic number. I need to set that here every time I call this to open a trade. So that takes care of opening up the trades such that I use magic number 1 for the primary trade and magic number 2 for the other 2 trades. Now to make this quick, I'm just going to paste in the functions that I've written. And the first is the update break even function. So here, update break even, I've got a quick check. If that input use break even is false, then I just return. And then I'm going to loop through all of the positions for int I equals positions total minus 1. While I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus, so I'm going backwards as I usually do. If not, position select by index I, comma, magic 2. So I'm selecting trades, the second and third trade. And this position select by index, that's a function that I haven't written yet, but I'll show that in a moment. So it takes the index I and the magic number. If the position stop loss is equal to position price open, then this trade has already moved to break even. This is also, or these both are also functions that I'm about to write. They're single line functions, and I'm using these functions because I can have easier compatibility between Metatrader 4 and 5. I capture the open time for the trade with position time open, another single line function that I'll write soon. And then I'm going to grab some values from that trade because I'm about to call yet another function that will actually shift to a different position. But I need these values if I'm going to modify this position. I need the ticket, the open price, and the take profit from the currently selected position. And these are the single line functions that I'll use to get those. Now I call this other function is primary open, and that will check to see if the primary trade matching this position is still open. So up here, I've checked to see that this trade, well, firstly by selecting magic 2, it's a secondary trade. The stop loss is not equal to the price open, so I haven't already moved it to break even. Now I want to find out if the primary trade is still open or not. If the primary trade is not open, so there's a not sign there, if that's not open, then it must have closed. This trade hasn't already moved to break even, so this is where I do want to move it to break even. And so I call yet another function that's just set break even for the ticket number, the open price, and the take profit. Those are the only arguments I need for this. And that's why I have to capture those values here, because the actual position will have shifted by using this is primary open. It will actually have shifted to the primary ticket if it exists. And if it doesn't exist, it would be anywhere. And then I just loop through again and I find these. Now, the reason I didn't use this approach initially, I was just concerned that there would be too many iterations and too much load on the system. To take an extreme example, if you have 100 positions open, then I'm going to go through 100 positions here, and this is primary open function has another loop like this, so that would be 100 times that I'd be searching for the primary for each of these. That's an extreme case and it's just unrealistic. Because I've got these conditions here, I'm only searching for these secondary trades. I'm only searching for the ones that are not already break even. You're just not going to have that many trades. It will be a much smaller number of iterations. First thing I'll do is I'll write this is primary open, then the set break even, and then I'll write these single line functions, which are going to be slightly different for Metatrader 4 and 5. Is primary open, just returns a Boolean, and I take this date time of time open. Now that is my method of finding trades that are in the same group. I identify the 3 trades that have been opened together because the open times of those trades will be within 5 minutes. They should be much closer, but I can't guarantee that they will be exactly the same. In the strategy tester, they usually are, but in real life, there may be a slight delay in opening the second and the third trade, so they could be seconds apart. They are not going to be that far apart that I need to worry about the next group of trades that you may open the next day. So I'm simply saying that if these trades are within 5 minutes of each other, then they must belong to the same group. So I'm looking for an is primary open with that time open value. I'm looking for a trade that was opened within 5 minutes of the time open, and that's the time open that I got from the secondary trade here. And here's where I use my loop for int I equals positions total. It's exactly the same loop, but here I'm calling position select by index I, and this time magic 1 because I'm looking for primary trades, not secondary trades, but I have another argument here, time open. So if position select by index, that simply returns a Boolean. If I'm able to select a trade that has primary magic number and this time open inside that position select by index, I'm going to compare the 5 minute range. It's within 5 minutes of this time open, then I'll just return true. That means I found that primary trade. And if I get all the way through this loop and don't find a trade, then I can just return false. So next, the set break even. This is different for Metatrader 4 and 5. So I have this ifdef MQL4 and ifdef MQL5. It takes a ticket number, a price open, and a take profit value. For Metatrader 4, I use the order modify function, and that takes a ticket. Now this is a long value being passed in for Metatrader 4 and 5 compatibility, but this function takes an integer, so I've got the casting to int here. The order modify function in Metatrader 4 operates for both orders and positions, and so it takes arguments that apply to both. It takes the price open, takes a new stop loss price, and because I'm moving to break even, the new stop loss price is the same as the open price, and a take profit price, which I don't want to change, and that's why I've passed in the existing take profit price. And then it takes an expiry time, which is applicable if this is an open order, but because this is a position, it doesn't matter, so I can just pass 0 for the expiry time. For MQL5, I use the trade object, position modify, and that only takes 3 arguments. It takes the ticket number, the stop loss price, which is the open price, and the take profit, which is the existing take profit. So now I need these single line functions, and they are different between Metatrader 4 and 5, so I'm going to introduce more of these ifdef MQL4 and ifdef MQL5. Let's start with MQL4 because it's at the top. Here are my single line functions. Positions total, which is a native function in Metatrader 5 but doesn't exist in Metatrader 4. So in Metatrader 4 I'm returning orders total. Then the rest of these, position stop loss, price open, ticket, time open, take profit, type, and magic, I can simply return the matching order, stop loss, open price, ticket, open time, take profit, type, and magic number functions from Metatrader 4. For Metatrader 5, I have the same functions, and I'm really only using them here so that I have the same function names. The methods for returning these, they all return position get something, and then there's double or integer, or in the case of the position symbol, position get string. Each of those has a matching argument, stop loss, price open, ticket, time, take profit, type, and so on. For the date time, I use position get integer, which is going to return a long, so I have a casting here to a date time. And for the position type, I'm returning that as an integer, so again I want to cast the long that comes back to an int. So those are all the single line functions. The only thing left to write is the position select by index. So let me go back here. You can see that I have two different position select by index, one that takes an index number, a magic number, and the open time, and the other that just takes the index and the magic number. So I'm going to start with the position select by index that just takes index and magic number. And that is also different between Metatrader 4 and 5. Starting with the MQ5 version. Position select by index, index magic number. U long ticket equals position get ticket index. That's an inbuilt function. Takes an index number and just returns the ticket number. And if that fails, it will return a ticket number of 0. So if ticket is less than or equal to 0, return false. So that means I failed to select that position. I also want to test that this is for the current chart symbol. So if position symbol is not equal to symbol, that's one of the single line functions, return false, because I'm scanning through all of the positions and I only want to look at positions for this symbol. I also only want to look at positions for this magic number. So the same test, if position magic is not equal to the magic passed in here, return false. And if I get to this point, I've got a valid position for the current chart symbol, magic number, and I can just return true. Let's do the same thing for Metatrader 4. And this is slightly different. There's still an order select in the case of Metatrader 4 instead of position select. Arguments are the index number, select by position, and mode trades. And if that fails, return false. So that takes the place of selecting the ticket number and checking that. I still have a test on order symbol equal to the chart symbol and order magic number equal to the magic number passed in, and in both of those cases I return false if it doesn't match. I have this one additional line because in Metatrader 4 orders and positions are mixed together, so I want to make sure that the position that I've selected is for an actual order type buy or an order type sell. So if the order type is not equal to a buy and the order type is not equal to a sell, that would mean it's a buy limit or a sell stop, something like that, then I return false. Otherwise return true. That takes care of the position select by index that just has the index number and the magic number. There is one function left, and that's the select by index that also takes the time. And this function can be common for Metatrader 4 and 5. So position select by index, take an index number, magic number, and a date time, which is the group time. I'm calling the other position select by index, and that's why this can be common. I handle all the non-common stuff in this position select by index here just by passing that index and magic number, and if that fails I can return false. The only thing that's left is to compare the time. I have position time open, one of the single line functions, and I have the group time that's passed in. The difference between those, and taking the absolute value with MathAbs, if that's greater than 300 for 5 minutes, then I can return false because this is a position that wasn't opened within 5 minutes of the trade that I'm searching. And if I get to this point, I can just return true. And that does it. So a quick summary of what happens here. Update break even. I look through all of the positions that I have, selecting only those that have magic number 2, which is the secondary trades. If those trades are already at break even, I don't need to do any more, so I can just use continue and go to the next trade in the list. I capture the time open from that trade. And just in case I'm going to do something, I grab a few variables from the trade as well. And then I attempt to find the primary trade that matches this secondary trade that I have. If I don't find the primary trade, and I already know that I'm not at break even, then I need to move this trade to break even. So I call the set break even function there. And that's it. Let me just make sure I haven't made a mistake there. I'll go to the MQ5, compile. No typing errors. Now, because this is a kind of catch-up video, I'm not going to take a lot of time showing demonstrations. The results are exactly the same as they were at the end of part 7. It's just that this code should be a lot easier for you to follow. So my apologies for the code in part 7, and I hope this has been more useful to you. You've at least learned some extra techniques. So thank you for watching. If you have got some value from this, please click the like button, and if you want to see more of our videos, click subscribe and then click the bell icon to be notified when we release new videos. Until next time, thank you for watching.